along the way.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So you're not just only focused on really detailed programs based off of one conversion, you're building out the life cycle. And I think what leads to actually even building a quality life cycle is testing. So let's say you do have customers who come in, and this isn't something that you can honestly do super immediately to just take action, from that sale onward forward. It's something that you kind of need to put in place before the holiday season, right? So you can segment out your list and look at people who've only made purchases when there's been a discount of X% and above, and run very specialized tests to those audiences, right? You could see, all right, we're going to do 50-50. 50% of that cohort is going to continue getting discounts, and let's see if they purchase. And the other 50% can get zero discount. Maybe you even do 33-33, where 133% size gets massive discounts, the other gets kind of smaller discounts, the other gets none. Because you just might have a product where people are only going to purchase when there's discounts, and a lot of companies feel kind of gross about that, but it's actually not the worst strategy in terms of taking over market share. I previously worked full-time at a company. One of my last real jobs was working on a retention program for a company that was the second place kind of competitor in a space. But the first place competitor had decently sized price points because they really did not want to just be a discount provider. And so we decided, well, we don't give a shit. We'll give discounts all day. And that was a way that we consistently built up market share versus the leader in the space. So, part of it is testing and understand your audience. And if at some point your customers don't really convert without discounts, yes, it is an issue, but it is just something for you to know before. So you can plan it out really, really nicely. And I think a lot of it just goes back to testing on your audience and understanding who you have. And, you can not trying to overcorrect as well. If you learn that your audience does react to discounts and frankly, does not react to buying full price, you at least know that, and you're not going to try to be someone you're not. And before I started a recruiting firm, I was consulting for a lot of different companies and in growth, and some of the companies had fairly similar products. And I actually went and consulted for that company that was the leader in the space after I left my full-time job. And, a lot of strategies that worked at one company did not necessarily work at another company because it's just not how the audience thought of that company. So really understand how your audience reacts to what you're doing. And from there, you can make better decisions and just be honest with yourself on what kind of product you have. Not everyone needs to have, the high Apple-esque branded, the highest price product in the category. You can do very well being a value brand.
One of the things both of you are alluding to is thinking about your customer journey and then having a testing iteration, and maybe even thinking about discounting, not just one time, but thinking about discount flows. How often have you guys gone back and looked at what has worked in previous? So like if we're thinking of Black Friday, like people we acquired last Black Friday, which ones of those did we actually end up retaining, and what about them jumps out as, so like a couple of attributes that I always like data points measure, easily measurable, but often not looked at a lot of times, is that, are people buying gifts for each other? Like if you look at the difference in billing and shipping zip code, you can easily figure that type of thing out. Or looking at which type of promotions or how deep of a promotion. So that's one question. Maybe each one of you like want to get your experience and as you've thought about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Emad. I think for us at least, because we have this ecosystem of repeat purchasers and members, there are two unique behaviors that are happening. Sort of your evergreen, right, day-to-day purchase of razors, shave butter, etc. And then you have these funny off-cycle moments of gifting, right? So maybe Valentine's Day, maybe Father's Day, maybe holiday. So one interesting thing that we typically will do is try to understand of our membership, who's likely to make that incremental purchase? And to your point, where are they sending it to? Are they sending it to a friend? Demographically, it's really interesting to see too, is it the men in our club that are gifting to other men? Is it the women that are hacking our club that are gifting it to their fathers? So it's really interesting to understand, the consumer motivation behind the behavior to then key off of, okay, we're seeing a pocket of really goodness here of men maybe that are in their early to mid 30s. Do we want to retarget them for Father's Day with the hypothesis that their fathers are probably still shaving. So I think that, to your point, Emad, going back and retrospecting the actualized behavior can kind of help develop those hypotheses that we can use throughout the remainder of the year, which has been really interesting for us at Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think the answer to where I've seen companies do that kind of analysis or not is just the size of the company, right? Before we started, when we were just sort of preparing for this webinar, we talked about sort of going really deep, and does going really deep in a lot of areas add value for different companies. And I think there's a certain level of diminishing returns if you go too deep in the analysis and don't go deep enough in terms of executing for the future. And you just kind of are okay with the fact that, hey, we don't have enough resources to know and do all of the research that we'd like to do on all of our customers, understand LTV. And that's probably where tools like yours help fill in some extra gaps where you don't have as many. If you had all the data scientists in the world, you probably don't even need a product like yours, but what's there, like, 50 companies in the world who have that many data scientists. So, you just live with it, with what you can, potentially, get insights into, but while also keeping, generally when you have a really lean team, they're all focused on executing for the future and doing a little bit of analysis, like, basic A/B tests, but being able to pull out full user lists of people based on what products they purchased in Black Friday, and then creating full plans for those specific segments. It's sort of things I've only seen in companies that have a significant amount of resources to do that. So there's always, and like, if you're small, will you even get that much return for segmenting your base to that small of an audience? Probably not. So I think
I was just going to say too, Anish, as you were saying, that made me think, like, what are the lightweight ways that we can understand behavior? Whether that's through maybe like email engagement or some sort of messaging positioning, right? To just drive, like, did the positioning as the lowest prices of the year versus the best gift ever drive more conversion, and how we position that? And that feels a little bit more lightweight. So maybe for those organizations that don't have the ability to go into that analysis paralysis, that's another way, right? Is just like kind of taking more of a snapshot of a specific campaign to just take those learnings forward with you. And to your point earlier, right? How is the brand positioned? Is it a value all the time? Is it the best in class? What are those different tenets of brand that will help boost conversion? I'm really leaning into those things.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it. And email is such a great place to be able to test all of that, because it's really fast and easy to test. You don't have to tear apart your website in order to put a bunch of stuff on there to see and you can create separate landing pages that aren't even built on your core website that can continue whatever messaging you have on your email. So, but the other wrench in all of that, while it is very logical and intelligent to do that, it may not be, aligning with the brand that was created by a lot of your brand teams that say, no, we are not a value brand. No, regardless of, whether this is a test that we want to learn on our customers, we can't put out messaging that says we give discounts. A company that I work with is Sephora, and like, they basically only had 2 discounts a year because they said that's not our brand. The people behind the scenes would have loved to test more and more kind of like offers on their audiences and learn what might work, but it didn't fit with, the brand quality. And I get it. Look, Sephora is one of the most well-known brands in America. So, what do you do then? You just kind of fly in the dark a little bit, I guess. But I don't have a great answer there. I don't know if either of you have kind of like a great answer there.
There's always tension, right? Healthy tension. When you kind of talk about what levers you can pull to drive conversion, the most effective, I think it's not a surprise to many folks on this call, is typically a discount, right? Give me an incentive to do this behavior. So I think that's a really good point, and a challenge that I faced a lot in my career around preserving brand, but while also driving results. So I think that's a really good point you bring up, Anish, and it's that really healthy tension of, does this feel authentic to us? Does this feel like who we are, as being 70% off every other week, every Thursday at 5 p.m.? Like, maybe it doesn't. But I think that's where the healthy conversations come in. And also how, there's a way to wrap discounts, wrap incentives in a brand lens, right? Of maybe loyalty, or of maybe customer appreciation. Things kind of like that, where it doesn't feel so egregiously like Groupon flash sale, 97% off Black Friday in February kind of thing. It can still feel authentic to brand.
Yeah.
One last thing I'll say about this is that, what you just said resonates so well. I think HelloFresh does this really well, which is build in retention into the offering, right? You do that, you get people to have more touch points. They build, like, getting them to build a habit, and every single habit book you'll read is like getting people to do something for 21 days is you'll get them to become a lot more loyal, right? So thinking through that journey, tying back to the first insight you shared, was thinking through that journey and really designing your campaign around that. I want also to time check.
I think you mentioned that there's a good example that HelloFresh does in building in retention into the customer touch point when they're joining.
They'll give discount.
Explain that a little bit more.
Where so if you're going to do 6 weeks of, like, if you're going to do a 6-week minimum, they're going to give you a discount on meals, but you have to sign up for 6 weeks minimum, or something along those lines, right? And then you get a deep discount because they want to get you into that habit, right? That's what they're optimizing for the habit, not for the conversion.
That's amazing. Yeah. Right. And actually, before this call, Kyle and I were commenting on different, like, kind of video conferencing technologies that are out there. Obviously, most people are using Zoom. Some people are using Microsoft Teams. And every now and then someone throws like a Citrix GoToMeeting at you because, someone somewhere who runs IT at a giant company signed like a 15-year-long agreement, and now they're stuck with like GoToMeeting from a contract they signed in like 2005 or something like that. So it might be a downside with too much retention, but no, I think 6 weeks of great food is plenty.
Awesome. Why don't we move to the next question? We have lots of stuff to cover. I already feel like we're behind, so why don't we just do this one, Anish?
Yeah, sure. What changes are expected this holiday season, and how do you retain customers in the new year? Yeah, obviously this is a very unique year. So what does that mean for companies that are looking to really blow out, Black Monday, Cyber Friday, or Black Friday, Cyber Monday?
You invented a new one. You invented 2 new ones.
For sure. What's different? I'm sure, Emad, you've seen how a lot of companies are kind of approaching this. What's different now?
Yeah, I think it's this is going to be probably in my opinion, the most unpredictable holiday season, given so many different trends that are going on. And when we talk about so many different trends, I mean, you have the iOS privacy changes that are having a huge impact on signal loss for Facebooks and Googles and Snapchats and Twitters of the world. You have the increased level of earning and income that people have because of a lot of the actions, not only by government, and it's bifurcated, right? So there's been a kind of a K type impact of COVID, and as people are coming out of COVID, some people have a lot more spending, some people have less. So where does that end up? And then you have the whole supply chain issue going on, where things are just not making it. Like, you might actually even convert people, but like, good luck shipping them something on time and getting them. So I think there's going to be one of those holiday seasons that might be very different from everything we've seen in the past. And it's very hard for me to like have any deep intuition of like, hey, like last year it was like, oh, this is going to be, everybody's at home, they're on their, they could buy gifts, they are going to buy gifts, and it was going to be a very intense holiday season. This year it could be intense, but then like, are we going to see that many people actually get delivery or not? It's very hard for me to tell. And how much is it going to cost to acquire these customers? It's hard. It's kind of a difficult question to answer, I think.
That's really interesting.
I was going to say, I think that my hypothesis is that we'll see shift in demand pulled up, right? We're already seeing some retailers with activity around value pricing, gifting, etc., to hedge the bet against the logistics nightmare that will be delivery. So making sure that it does get there in time. That, coupled with hundreds of thousands of retail stores closing over the last year, I think will put some additional pressure on the e-commerce platforms, and ultimately, and shipping logistics, that we'll kind of see that come to life this season as well. I think it's really interesting to sort of suppose and think through how the last year of maybe some economic recovery will help influence additional sales. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But I also just want to touch briefly on the retention component, and it kind of really goes back to what we were talking about before. right? What is the way that you're already kind of premeditating and thinking about the journey that includes beyond the first transaction, beyond that transaction that's happening in Q4? What are you doing in Q1 to light up those folks and get them excited about your brand? What events are happening at that time for you to kind of make sense to be in their inbox or on their phones or wherever that may be, to announce something maybe new and exciting for them?
That makes a lot of sense. And even looking at traditional media, not even media that's focused around retail, shopping, marketing, you see a lot of articles about supply chain issues and how people are not going to get their gifts in time for the holidays this year versus other years. Do you think that's going to shift people to go in store because they're starting to get scared? Like, oh yeah, I'm going to order this November 15th and I'm not going to get it till January. I don't know if you even seen some of that, and is there any push from either Dollar Shave Club or any other companies you're working with that do both digital and kind of physical retail to like put more into physical retail because of that, or not really, and just get ahead of it and get people to shop earlier in the year?
Yeah, I think for us at least, it's going out earlier, right? It's giving
Okay.
ourselves a little bit more time to ensure that the consumer has time to receive that gift or that item. I think you have a good hypothesis though, right? Of the fear of missing out or the fear of not having it delivered on time and driving people on foot, into big box retail or wherever it may be, to have that security of I have that now, or have the item with me now. It's taken care of, it's done, which I think could provide a lot of comfort to retail shoppers this season.
Makes a lot of sense. Emad, are you seeing any kind of shifts on the way people are approaching this year based on the shipping kind of issues and worries?
I think that it's very clear that people are, this is top of mind, and the way that we've been, like, the conversations I've been having with execs is like, hey, look, you know that like you're gonna have this, very likely be in a situation where you have a bunch of orders come in, and you have like shipping prioritization, logistics prioritization that needs to happen. Who are you going to decide to ship to first, right? And this is where being able to predict which customers look like your best long-term customers and making sure they get the shipping first can be really helpful in this weird time of decision making. And the cost of not knowing who your most valuable customers are who are ordering at the time of the order is really, really high, right? Not having that intuition. So those are the conversations we're having at the moment, thinking about getting them to think about, hey, look, make sure that you have your prioritization set straight whenever these things do happen, so you're not caught off guard. But that's kind of the big thing I'm expecting to like be able to help with everybody we're working with, be like, hey, let's help you prioritize.
That's super interesting. I've actually never heard of, and I'm guessing a lot more retailers and e-commerce companies are doing that, but I've never heard of prioritizing shipping based on like customer value.
And you wouldn't have to do this normally if like you weren't supply constrained, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just a now thing. So you haven't really been hearing about people doing it in previous years, like pre-COVID?
Correct. I mean, there was a time at the beginning of COVID where a lot of like essentials had to be, which demand has gone through the roof for things like toilet paper. Sure. And other day-to-day essentials, where this idea first came about.
I would also say
every day. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Emad. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say another version of that story, right, is kind of this pre-sale or release early to exclusive access to preferred customers, right? Whether that was in stores or a special sales event or what have you. But I think, Emad, it's almost like the 2.0 version of that sort of level of service, of the smart version of that in terms of fulfillment and prioritization.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping tabs on time, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Go ahead, Anish.
Yeah. How do you take your efforts in the US and take them to Europe or other places internationally? Different languages, different insights, different customers. How can you just drag and drop a lot of what you're doing and be off to the races? So any thoughts here would be great.
Yeah, I can speak for at least the side of Dollar Shave Club. We are an international company. We do business in Canada, the UK, and Australia. And one thing that has helped us be more successful in this global expansion is specifically having folks on the ground in those geographies, right? Experts in those areas to tell us what are the sort of cultural norms, what are the shaving habits of people that live in these different areas of the world. So I think that when you're thinking about the adaptation of a business in the States versus anywhere else, it's critical to have that sort of insider knowledge about whether or not Black Friday is a thing. Is that a thing? Is it Boxing Day? Before you kind of put pen to paper in terms of thinking about what your marketing plan is and how you're reaching consumers, positioning, other details in that vein.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think when we did touch upon this a little bit before this event, when looking over this question, that it's not necessarily something you can just drag and drop in terms of taking all of your US strategies, taking all your email campaigns, just launching it over there, taking all your acquisition, paid acquisition, organic acquisition campaigns, and just launching it over there. And when I'm thinking about a very popular D2C brand that I have had conversations with people who work there, when they launched Europe, it was a massive money suck, and it was actually part of the reason that their financials were in such bad shape, because they just wanted to scale as rapidly as possible without getting the fundamentals in place. And they eventually shut down Europe because they were just losing money year over year. And I previously worked at a company that had about 200 million in top line revenue in the US. And, we launched Europe, we launched Asia, and it took years to get to even single digit millions in both of those markets. Right. So, it's not as easy as just leaping and running. And I think you bring up a really good point that companies who I've seen do it well, Kyle, they've built full teams locally. I think Emad talked about HelloFresh being a really great company. That's one of the companies I've seen in D2C and e-commerce that have launched country by country by country incredibly thoughtfully. And we've worked with them as well. And now they're profitable in every single country that they operate in. And it's because they've built the teams, they've built the foundations, they did the research. They actually went, instead of just launching at times, just acquiring companies, which obviously not everyone can do. You can't just go buy up everyone if you don't have a piggy bank, but that helped them as well. Just immediately get the knowledge of that country instead of just starting from scratch. So overall, I've rarely seen it be off to the races for any brand who just basically copies and pastes their US strategy to Europe or Asia or anywhere else.
I got to see this not in D2C context, but when I was helping run marketing operations at Facebook, we started off, and it's funny because this was like early days of Facebook trying to sell ads outside of the US, and started off with a very naive approach, which we said, hey, we're going to have a centralized US team that's going to build all the content. We're going to have a couple of localization teams that localize and just launch the same campaigns that were being built and created in the US. And as you can imagine, it kind of failed miserably early days. What ended up happening is we were using translation services that were they were tone deaf. They weren't really they weren't able to they were able to adapt to language, but not to the actual culture of those markets. And we first did it by language and realized that doesn't quite work. And what we had to then do is adapt to this by building local marketing teams that were connected to the central marketing teams. And while there were some campaigns that were global campaigns that would still go through that localization, that were tied more to product launches or things that are very related to the Facebook product. But anytime we were doing campaigns around holiday, or let's say I'll pick an example like the Champions Cup in Europe, right? That's a huge thing over there. People don't even know about that here, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that things are lined up. The Soccer World Cup, we don't really we care about it here in the US, but it's a huge deal in many other localities, and those had their own campaigns, and local teams there had to do a ton of work. But it all then, the impact it had from running finance and operations is the cost of personalization, right? Like we obviously, like as a marketer, we love this mantra of like marketing has to be personalized and individual. But the part that we miss is the cost of personalization is shifting that cost from media buying to like creative building, and being very, very personalized can actually increase your creative cost by quite a bit. Now you have to do different campaign for different localization. So very, very hard problem to scale marketing and acquisition and retention in a wholesale way. So very, very good points on this. And I'm just like, this reminded me a lot of this like experience I got to see.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And it's a really valuable kind of anecdote there as well, because someone would imagine Facebook has so many like tier 1 employees and like so many resources and probably a budget that, you know, goes a lot further than almost any other company out there in the world. Yet you can still be clumsy about it and make mistakes because you're, you know, you're human and we're all kind of like trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah, no. I mean, this one, in my opinion, had like very much, you know, when you drive it from your perspective, not the perspective of the customer, it can be that's I think one of the naive mistakes that was made. But obviously corrected. Like now we sell, you know, Facebook sells ads everywhere in the world. It's doing well at that.
Makes sense. And it's also good learning to like, you know, you can definitely take a swing at things as long as you don't like break the bank, right? And the D2C company I'm talking about, they broke the bank trying to launch Europe, right? And that made for very difficult issues across their worldwide P&L. But you can limp in and try things as long as you're not spending crazy amounts of money and doing it from experimental standpoint, not from the standpoint of like, we're going to blanket this country with this massive plan that we've created before we've even executed and taken none of the learnings and iterated. We just know what we're doing. And so it sounds like with Facebook, you tried some things that didn't work, you learned and tried better things as you kind of grew more intelligent.
Yeah. All right, should we move on to our next question? Do this.
What data is used besides purchase and production data to make predictions? I think Emad, you have a lot of insights into that.
Yeah, this is a really good question. Obviously, like purchase data and production data, very useful. And I think purchase data is like, hey, what line item is being purchased, what page views, and like what flows people are coming into. But you can use other data sets as well, which is third-party data sets if you have access to them. You can use data around people's buying behavior, like quizzes, if you have like an onboarding quiz. So several data sets that can enable an understanding of what journey a customer is going to take are easily available to the companies. Now, what I will preface here is, what predictions are we like talking about? Like revenue predictions? Are we talking about like customer level predictions? The few things to note are, if you're thinking about acquisition campaigns or retention campaigns, you can be doing predictions at group level, at cohort level. But the thing that we've seen where the most advanced companies are doing in predictions at the individual customer level around basics of, is this customer high value, low value, like long-term retention, trying to predict retention. On the retention side, you're trying to predict churn and churn date. And then are you able to do it accurately? And are you setting up some sort of a back test to identify that what you're building is accurate? So this is where working with either your data team or a third-party provider like Retina, you'll see a ton of learnings that either the data team has seen or the provider like ourselves have seen, and we'll be able to help bridge that gap. But I'm curious to hear if any of you have had any experience or diving deeper into this from your perspective.
Something that you said, Emad, that really kind of resonated for me is, you know, the idea of trying to personalize on the individual level, right? So something at Dollar Shave Club that we have is a predictive sort of recommendation engine, right? To say, like, to take all of these different data attributes, right? Maybe your age, the last time you purchased, what you did purchase last time, what we saw in your member profile, maybe where you're shipping from, to take all of these different known behaviors and attributes to then create a score to say, you know what, Anish probably will buy shea butter next. So here's a ton of information about shea butter, here's a sample about shea butter, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for me, the idea around trying to be as personalized as you can, specifically when it comes to recommendations like this, is critical. And what we ended up seeing was, significant lift in terms of conversion and AOV by virtue of sort of building out that model and tool. But certainly, as far as the data attributes are concerned, it kind of ranges far and wide.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, generally the data I look at is purchase and production data. So I really enjoy doing analysis based on previous purchases. But of course, you don't always have that on especially prospective new users. So I think a lot of what Emad talked about and ramping up against third party, and using external research sources. You could potentially look at what other companies are doing in terms of their advertising, and take some learnings from that. But I've seen that go horribly wrong, where companies say, well, this company is more successful than us and they're doing this type of advertising, therefore it must work, when it frankly does not often. So I don't love that strategy either. So yeah, I think a lot of what Emad said is really valuable.
Why don't we move on to the next question, just in interest of time?
Yeah, so this one is all around, one of the biggest issues hurting everyone's acquisition campaigns over the last 6 months, iOS 14. So, what can be done? Where can where can companies continue to scale new users and overall company revenue while knowing that, the attribution capabilities are reduced?
Yeah, I can chime into this one. This one we've been very, very close to, actually. So I wanted to just the thing that we've seen with iOS changes, right? So and I'll just share some perspective and background. So every time you log on to a website or you are on Facebook, there is a signal that Facebook or your iOS operating system will share back with some of the SDKs installed on the apps. So for example, Facebook, let's say you go to like Allbirds, Facebook will get a notification that this IDFA, this phone device that belongs to this Facebook user, went to this Allbird website. Now, what iOS has done is like, this seems very privacy non-centric, where you're sharing cross-platform or cross website data with other developers such as Facebook. So they put in a opt-in clause. So as now you like sign up for, or you set up your iPhone, they'll ask, hey, are you, or you pull up your Facebook for app for the first time, they'll say, hey, would you want to allow Facebook to track you across all these websites? And most people will say no. And specifically, only 95% of people have said, no, I don't want Facebook to track me. And what that has done is Facebook can now no longer take attribution on the fact that somebody saw an ad on Facebook on a certain device, and then within a certain attribution window, bought something, at least on that device. Now that's causing a ton of signal loss. So Facebook now cannot optimize around trying to find your most likely customer who will convert. So what's happening is campaigns are staying in learning mode much longer than they would normally to hone in on your best customer. And when I say best customer in this case, your most likely customer to convert. So this is creating a ton of pressure on pricing. So what's happened is the amount of people on the platforms and the people opted in hasn't changed. All of a sudden you're spending a lot of money on Facebook, and that money, your CPM is going up, your cost per acquisition is going up. It's gone up anywhere from as low as 20% for some companies to as high as about 100% for many other companies. And this is, in my opinion, the one of the things that we are unlikely to see a reverse trend in. Customer acquisition costs go up over time. All of us already know this. But the trend this is taking is like this has put a whole new inflection into the ecosystem, which I think the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world will survive because there's because of the not only the balance sheets, but the ability to like have strategies like Retina's, which is being able to do value-based optimization. However, the thing I'm scared for is a lot of the smaller companies that have yet to like, they've not even implemented the CAPI integration, which is the conversion API integration, right? So those are things that are like very worrisome about the iOS changes. And iOS 14 started this change. iOS 15 has doubled down on it with like even removing the email address sharing. And the other big shoe to drop is your CCPA implementation, or CCPA changes, which are your regulation around the GDPR version of California that's coming in, because of which you're going to see Google Chrome also implement its changes of taking away cookies. So this is causing a ton of stir in the market, obviously, but this is creating a sense of urgency in many of the businesses to adapt. And the folks who will adapt and who will implement CAPI and who will implement some new way of thinking about measurement are probably going to end up surviving, whereas the ones that fail to do it are the ones that, in my opinion, will see cost of acquisition continue to increase. And how long can you do that for? Customer acquisition cost cannot exceed your lifetime value, right? And that's the problem that I foresee with these changes that are coming.
Yeah, it's tough. So what do you think companies can do to improve their broader marketing, just knowing that this is the new normal, that what you were previously able to do over the last, we'll call it, 6 to 10 years in paid social ads, you're not able to do with the same efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, the three things that we've seen, number one is, the very first thing is implementing CAPI, which is the conversion API. If that gets implemented, what it does is it enables a server-to-server connection between basically Facebook and your data warehouse, that as soon as an order happens, you're able to send that data. Now, that will help resolve some short-term issues, but the valuable thing to do is what we're helping companies do is send in additional signals about who the most valuable customers are and what their value is, and letting the Facebook and Google ad platforms optimize ad campaigns around that. Second strategy is to make sure that you're diversifying your channels outside of Facebook's and Google's of the world, if possible, and going to ecosystems that have some level of resilience. So we're seeing connected TV as one that, many folks already have great creative, videos are great, cost of acquisition is going up. Connected TV historically has been pretty high acquisition cost because the amount of content and amount of ad slots wasn't as high. But now, as content has gone through the roof, the amount of ad slots that have become available has actually gone up. So the inventory is going up and is going to continue to go up, at least for the foreseeable future. It makes sense to like hedge your bets towards that. And then the last thing is, I would recommend having a conversation, if you guys have a account manager at Facebook or Google, to have the conversation with them, because they're also trying very hard to enable companies to figure out how do they find the most relevant audience fast. And when it comes to relevance, we are still at the early innings, right? Think about like $380 billion were spent this year on digital advertising alone. And of that, about less than 1% have a click-through rate, and probably lower has a actual conversion rate. So it's still, most of that $380 billion is being wasted, right? So being able to bring any level of efficiency by creating relevance between the audience and the product you're selling, I think will go a long way.
Awesome. I think that it's not easy, but definitely a lot of the things you're saying make sense.
All right, should we, I realize we are at 11:53 and we have not done our Q&A session. So let's make sure that we give the audience some room to like share any thoughts or answers. Let's skip the topics of discussion. And I was thinking we go back to the audience answers and see if anybody from the audience has anything to share on what are some of the creative growth strategies you have found success in, and what are you looking forward to? And while we wait, Kyle, maybe you can share your thoughts on how would you answer this question, and then let's go to Anish.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll take the second one. What new growth strategies are you excited to test out next year? I think for me, it's working more closely with you and your team, Emad, right? How do we leverage the predictive LTV models? How do we leverage the predictive churn models in order to stop the bucket from leaking and also just raise the tides total? So I think for us, that's one transparently that is top of mind for us as we kind of launch into 22 and think about how to start tuning some of those models.
Yeah, and I have not touched a growth campaign in close to a half a decade. So I would not be the best person to ask there. But when I'm talking to people who've seen some success, you touched upon it, Emad. It's channel diversification, right? You saw a lot of companies really scale on the back of paid social and do it well and do it efficiently, but now are getting into some trouble given that we're really reliant on that channel because it was the most efficient and it's where they got the best kind of ROAS from. And so, we did a recent event with folks who have led podcast campaigns. We've done events with people who've done OTT. I've talked to people who've scaled. Influencer has become really interesting, especially if you can figure out a great process to scale across micro influencers and not just only have to pay the big names. So I think a lot of the creativity now is more in distribution than necessarily than the actual creative itself.
Of course, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think this concept of diversification is definitely one I expect quite a bit to happen. And also like thinking about like the customer journeys that you had talked about, Kyle, early in the first question. I think that's going to be that being thoughtful about thinking about retention in your growth strategy, right? Let's open it up to questions as well. So as you're sharing your answers, can you also share? Let's have the audience share any questions that they might have. I'm gonna go to the Q&A section because I'm rushing to try to close. Let me refresh this. As we do this, let's go to. All right, so the last couple of minutes, I still want to end on time. So what I want to do is, as you share your answers, please also share any questions you might have for us. I wanted to leave the contact information up. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to reach out to us. And Anish and Kyle, any thoughts while we wait for any Q&A?
Yeah, I see there's one question coming in from Alex Colston asking if you can use an ESP for a CDP temporarily. I've never used Klaviyo as a CDP before. I think, an advanced ESP that's holding a lot of your customer data, you could probably dig in and get some insights. But I've never used them to really be the source of where to get customer data and like slice and dice. But I'm not sure if either you have, Kyle or Emad.
We have not. So typically those two things are pretty separate for us in our worlds, and similar to Anish. I don't have any experience with Klaviyo as a platform specifically, but certainly I'm sure that across the gamut of different ESPs, they have different levels of fidelity in terms of what they can offer. So some probably do better than others. I haven't been in the market for that type of offering before, so I'm sorry, Alex, can't give you any additional color there. But good luck in your search.
I'll say one thing about just ESPs generally. So I think there is obviously, like, as holiday buying kicks in, I think there is a in my opinion, there is value in reaching back out to your current customers. So if you think about media buying and customer acquisition, we typically exclude our current customers from any media buying, and that makes a lot of sense. However, if you are able to go back and see who are your churned customers who can be resurrected. So what I would do is go back and look at the most valuable customers who have not come back in a while, and think about any new product offerings that you have had since then, and packaging something around that. It's a very cheap way to go acquire customers, to do it through your email campaign. But before you run the email campaign, building some brand awareness through custom audiences, and then running the email campaign and having that be one of the touch points. It might be a good way to resurrect some of the customers that are either at the brink of churning or have already churned in the past.
That's a great recommendation. I was going to say, if you're living specifically, Alex, only in your ESP and that is the ecosystem, at least you can key off of historical email engagement to sort of understand who are your leads, right? Who are those folks that are most likely to revive or most likely to have an additional conversion, especially around this time of the year. And to the extent that you have it, any hypotheses about why they left or why they're latent or why they're lapsed can really help you cater the message and the offering for that matter to drive for that additional incremental conversion.
I also noticed we're at the end of our time. I know lots of you might have any hard stops, so maybe we just end it here. I want to give a huge thank you to both our panelists. Anish, thank you so much for helping put this together, and Kyle, a special thank you to bringing your expertise and such a good conversation. Really, really appreciate you joining. And then lastly, I want to say thank you to all the attendees who decided to join and participate and share their time and some thoughtful questions. But yeah, with that, I want to say thank you. And again, thank you, Anish and Kyle. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. A lot of fun.
All right, guys. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.